I'm Jim Check. You're watching Kelowna Now. With me on the phone, Ian Burns, all the way out in Ottawa, our managing editor. We've got a really big show again today. And the big show, we'll start off with the big news, I guess. The Liberal leadership race, the deadline to enter has passed, and the front runners, Mark Carney and Chrystia Freeland for sure, they picked up the most endorsements for Liberal MPs. That doesn't mean they're going to get it because they have to do through the, if you're a registered Liberal, I think you have a few more days to register as a Liberal, and then you can vote and elect the new leader of the Liberal Party. And then we have a picture here of all the people that are running. The next image there, we have Mark Carney there, and then Chrystia Freeland, Karina Gold, and then Chandra Arya, Jamie Bastiste, Frank Baylis, and Rudy Dalla. There you go. Did I get that all right?
Bonus points for getting the ones at the bottom there, I would say.
Yeah. I'm reading from a list though, so that helps.
Yeah, I mean, the way it looks now, and this is reflected in a lot of the commentary from across the media. The way it looks now is Carney is the kind of establishment choice, the Liberal establishment, I mean, like the big power brokers,
Yeah.
including the Prime Minister, behind the scenes at least, are backing Carney. Then
Yeah.
Freeland is kind of the challenger, and she represents a certain, I guess like a disaffected minority, but we'll wait and see if it is a minority, but a disaffected group within the party that, want to chart a slightly different path. Karina Gould is, I think she's just trying to put a big sign on top of her head saying, "Look at me." Usually these things succeed, actually, though, when they, look in the US is a clear example. People like Vivek Ramaswamy, everybody knew he's never going to win, but you kind of do it to get a job, don't you? And it also
Yeah.
worked for RFK. And then this quartet here. I mean, I guess they probably just want to not necessarily push themselves forward, but sometimes they'll run just so that they can like push an idea forward. Like often they'll
Mm-hmm.
just have one idea and they just want to keep talking about this idea so that they can get it out there. And I would imagine that that's kind of what they're pushing for. I mean, this Frank Baylis guy seems to be a little bit more serious, and he kind of has like a whole set of ideas. But yeah, it's looking a lot like Carney v. Freeland right now.
Yeah, and then we have CBC here chatting, but we're going to play a clip, and they seem to have picked their candidate as well.
Further away from Justin Trudeau because she's still very much attached to him in terms of the policies that she once loved and now is ditching.
Yes, but there's a limit to how much you can roll when you're tied by a rope.
Yeah.
Let's be serious here. If you Google Chrystia Freeland, you're going to almost always see a picture of Justin Trudeau standing next to her or her standing next to him. And I think many Liberals are saying, well, if you didn't like Justin Trudeau, you probably won't like Chrystia Freeland.
So there you go. They seem to be, these are the same people that have been protecting, I won't say that much about Chanteller, but they're protecting Justin Trudeau forever. And all of a sudden now, when it's convenient, they seem to want to slip a noose around him and Chrystia Freeland at the same time. And obviously they're promoting, Mark Carney by disapproving of Chrystia Freeland.
Well, all that reasoning there would also apply to Mark Carney, who's been very, very strongly associated with Justin Trudeau. And
both of them.
To the extent that he advised him on economics, which is considered to be the main weakness of the Liberal Party. So,
he's been the
least
economic
this
advisor.
Government, anyway.
He's been the economic advisor to both Chrystia Freeland and Justin Trudeau. So the three of them would be the three amigos or the three musketeers or whatever you want to call them. And then this seems to be like they're trying to paint one of those as the sacrificial lamb or the useful idiot or whatever. But
yeah, I mean, look, you've got to kind of applaud Mark Carney for being so brazen as to attempt to claim that he's some kind of outsider. I mean, that is kind of That's funny, really. You gotta
Yeah.
laugh at
I
that.
don't know if that's applause
But
that's required or just more just like
well,
really like shock.
kind of just like if somebody was gonna try and climb Everest in his, Y fronts or something. It's like, it's stupid, but you've got to applaud him. At least he's doing it. At least doing something crazy. But I mean, realistically, there's no chance. Mark Carney is. It's very, very difficult to think of somebody that is more of the establishment, that's more inside than him.
Wow.
In many ways, even more than Chrystia Freeland, I would say. Like
Yeah.
Chrystia Freeland at least spent some time working as a journalist, where you're supposed to be adversarial towards power. Mark Carney is basically, for his entire career, been at the center of power, financial power, and then with central banks. I mean, come on. Who are you trying to fool with that sort of thing? I don't know who's falling for it.
Yeah, and then the main pillar of the distaste for the Liberal Party policies has been the climate change or the carbon tax. And Mark Carney has been making a living off of climate change policies. He's headed up several organizations all around being like the climate guru or whatever you want to call him, the climate change financial guru. And he's been sitting on a bunch of boards. And for him to think differently, even that, resounding support by Stephen Jabot of Mark Carney has to have Canadians worried that this is just going to be more of the same in a repackaged climate change carbon tax or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like big political parties in democratic systems. They're almost always coalitions of people, so there are many different groups. And that's true of the Liberal Party. And one of the groups within that coalition is the environmental activist sort of group. And they are behind Mark Carney. Not just the MPs, but a lot of the sort of activists and the money people. That they're on his ship. So I mean, and Justin Trudeau was kind of in that group as well, as I'm sure most people are aware, and he backs Carney. So it's kind of, yeah, he's got that around his neck. Like whether or not that's going to be whether that's going to weigh him down or lift him up, I guess in the long run we're going to have to just wait and see. But it looks like it's going to weigh him down right now, and I'm quite surprised as well that there hasn't been more scrutiny of his adoring comments that he made about Greta Thunberg, who
Well,
has always
like,
been controversial, but now is spectacularly controversial now that she's revealed herself to be an unhinged extremist that goes around talking about the abolition of Israel and things like that, and just absolutely mad, mad
yeah.
woman.
If the shoe was on the other foot, they would have been asking Pierre Polyev to be, distancing himself from Greta Thunberg. And there's no calls for actions there because of, like you said, like her actions lately are nothing to do with climate change, but like we're basically removing a race from the planet.
Yeah, and she's been accused by a lot of organizations of anti-Semitism and associating with anti-Semites. It's pretty gruesome, actually. I mean, there's a reason that you haven't seen Greta Thunberg in the newspapers lately. It's because what she's doing is repugnant now. And I think a lot of people maybe feel embarrassed to have ever been associated with such a disreputable, gross person as that.
Yeah.
But
Well, Mark
Carney
Carney has
is an
said that.
important person,
Yeah,
so he's going to have to deal with that, yeah.
yeah, because he said that she's kind of like his hero.
Well, he
Um,
just kind of, yeah, and he said that she was, there was a phase of history when she was kind of looked upon as almost like a child saint and as some kind of somebody that had like almost like she had a connection with God or something that everybody was envious of, and she knew the truth, and she was worshipped by a lot of people such as Mark Carney that should have known a lot better, and it's a question of judgment, I guess, in retrospect.
Dan Elbas points something out that you and I have been pointing out for a bit here. Interesting, a Trudeau claim that Kamala Harris's presidential defeat was an attack on women's progress. And here they are all promoting Mark Carney over Freeland. Again, the self-described feminist turns out to be nothing more than just talking points again and an attack on Trump. And then, like a lot of people are saying, like you kept poking and, during his whole as he was prime minister, he had nothing. They used his name. They used Trump's name as a slur on Pierre Poilievre to top it off. And then you expect him to be cordial?
Well, I'm not sure who threw the first punch. I don't know because obviously Trump is a very belligerent,
Yeah.
insulting man as well. There's a good chance that he insulted Trudeau first. I don't actually know, but yeah, I mean, he can't now clutch his pearls and pretend that it's all come from Trump because yeah, not just Trudeau, but a lot of the kind of liberal and left-wing establishment and media in Canada have been attacking Trump now for what, it's about a decade now, isn't it? Probably more than a
Even when he
decade.
was out of politics, they've been attacking him, right? And they used it to attack Pierre Poilievre and conservatives in general.
Yeah, and they would go around and act very self-satisfied, wouldn't they, at these conferences with people like the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, and various leaders, and places like WEF where Trump spoke yesterday virtually. They would go around, wouldn't they, and they would drop these not very subtle sort of attacks, wouldn't they, at Trump, and they would refer to him as a threat to democracy and all kinds of nonsense like that.
Yeah.
And I guess now, yeah, the chickens have come home to roost,
Well, there was that
and
one time when
that includes
Trudeau
Trudeau.
on the live mic was like dissing Trump there with a couple other world leaders, and there was a live mic on him. So
Yeah, I remember. I do recall that. Yeah, that's quite cringe-inducing, wasn't it? But
yeah,
I just think they let their standards. It's ironic because this is how they always described Trump. They said that he's like he has no standards and he can't behave in civilized society and he keeps breaking all of these traditions and so on. And then, when he was elected and when he ran, they did precisely that, didn't they? They broke all decorum, all sort of tradition in diplomacy and so on, and they said a lot of very, very stupid things about Donald Trump. And yeah, now it's biting them on their rear ends a little bit, isn't it?
and here's one that you and I talked a little bit before we went live here. The U.S. is sending rockets into space, developing quantum computing, and he's getting investments, $500 billion for AI, and now there's another $600 billion. Like they're getting trillions of dollars in investment. And meanwhile, in Canada, Justin Trudeau gets fact checked by a ketchup company. Um, Heinz came out and said that he's spreading misinformation about their company. This is what the Liberals are doing.
Yeah, well, I mean, you'd think if he was going to go ahead with that, the amount of times he's mentioned French's and Heinz, you'd think, wouldn't you? You would think that he would have at least asked one of his little creatures in the Liberal Party and said, "Look, will you go and just get yourself on Wikipedia? Will you spend 10 minutes, mate? Just make sure that this is all kosher." But he obviously didn't. He just opened his mouth and like dropped Heinz in it, and then Heinz have said, "No, you're wrong. We do actually use Canadian tomatoes, just like French's."
You had some stronger words, and that this is like more of a reflection of his leadership over the past 10 years, and just
Well,
mistake after mistake.
yeah, I mean, it's glib, isn't it? Glib is the word. It's thoughtless. When you're going to speak, when you're the prime minister of a country of 40 million people and you're going to get in front of a microphone and say something and you're going to name drop a company, a number of companies, and you're going to claim certain things as facts, it is very much incumbent upon you to know what you're talking about. And certainly, according to Heinz, at least, who would be the best people in the best position to know, you would expect, he didn't tell the truth. He didn't have his facts aligned, and he's been accused, hasn't he, our dear Prime Minister, of doing that on dozens of occasions throughout his time in charge of Canada. And yeah, I mean, when you're looking now at probably the biggest crisis in his entire 10 years, 9.5 years, whatever it is, when you're looking at that now and he's talking about ketchup and he's being fact checked by a ketchup company, it's kind of, yeah, it's certainly reflective of his leadership style, perhaps. I mean, a lot of people like that tweet that you pointed to there. A lot of people are saying that anyway, that it's indicative of his quality as a leader, I'm sorry to say. Hello. I can't hear you.
Maybe that's the whole deal.
Oh, I can hear you now. Howdy.
It looks like that mic went dead. That's the whole problem. So there you go. Wasn't charged. We're moving on to the number of unemployed Canadians. This is a Tracy Gray post. Is up now, December over December, another 250,000 since last year, and that's just speaks volumes of the economy.
That's quite terrible, that, isn't it, really?
It doesn't
Um,
good.
it's been happening it's been going up for a while. I mean, it's still sort of, if you look at the grand history of employment, it's still reasonably sort of okay, isn't it? It's not in double figures at least, but in terms of percentages, but that's still not good,
That's it.
especially since people have got used to a full employment economy as they have in sort of recent years.
Yeah, but that's all. That's 250,000 people.
Well, it's
Not
up. That's
good.
an increase of that, yeah. So it's actually 1.5 million people in total now.
Yeah. Um, Sorry, we had that little technical difficulty. There's in your five things, a fantastic write-up from Evan Dwyer from CBC. Trump's threats reveal the trouble of Canadian pipelines running through the U.S. Like, I mean, that's the problem. Like, getting oil out to the east is not as easy as people think. Like, actually, oil goes into the U.S. and back up into the east, right?
Yeah, and that's what all that malarkey was about. Was it last year or 2 years ago when the governor of Michigan, I can't actually remember when it was. The years seem to all blend into one another now. But the governor of Michigan, Greta something or other, can't quite
Whitmore,
remember her name.
Whitmore.
That's the one. Yeah, she wanted to block it, didn't she? And there was all hell broke loose, and then there's a lot of panic in Ontario because the oil comes out of Alberta down into, I think it's Wisconsin as well, and then Michigan, and then back up
Yeah.
into Sarnia, which is sort of southern southwestern Ontario, and then that's how Ontario gets its oil. So yeah, I mean that's like when people like Danielle Smith are saying, let's not be hasty now and block oil to the US. That's kind of like that's aspect of their argument is like we're actually going to shoot ourselves in the foot if we do that.
Hmm. I would say more than the foot in that case. Um,
The head, maybe. Yeah.
yeah,
But I mean,
Canadian.
it's also, I would just say this article, it goes into a lot of very interesting aspects of this debate. And it also goes back to we can now say, I mean, a lot of people said it at the time, but we can say it now with certainty, the incredible naivety of a lot of politicians and a lot of business persons who thought that the US was always going to be there and it was always going to be reliable, even though, a lot of people at the time were saying, look, we can't just depend on this other country that has its own priorities and its own kind of, especially with the election of Trump the first time, it sometimes has these moments where it does something quite unpredictable. We can't just rely on them. We've got to have our own sort of infrastructure in place so that we can make money and also get fuel across the country by ourselves without them. So it's interesting in that sense. I mean, because they say here, it was a no-brainer back then. It was a no-brainer to work with the US because, they're such good guys, those good old Americans. But we look at it now and it's brainless, isn't it? It was a brainless thing to do, not a no-brainer.
And then Danielle Smith, she says she's ready to work with Trump to resurrect the Keystone Pipeline. Sounds like he wants it. Sounds like she wants it. So that looks like, and that's the next slide there. That looks like that's gonna, happen if we get some trade relations working, right?
I'd say, I mean, that's a good one for sure. I mean, really, that should have been done ages ago, shouldn't it? And that's just.
That was Biden's move on day one. Remember that? That was his day one thing. He killed the Keystone Pipeline. A
Yeah,
lot
and
of
now Trump
American
day one.
jobs. A lot of American jobs went. A lot of U.S. or a lot of Canadian jobs went with that stroke of the pen. And
Well,
people are
also a
freaking out
lot of
about Trump's.
Canadian.
People are
There were a
freaking out
lot of
about
Canadian
Trump's.
protesters, weren't there? It wasn't just Americans.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
But yeah, the Energy East one, that's the prize, isn't it?
Yeah.
And maybe more expansion of the Trans Mountain. They're the ones that really matter. Keystone just goes down into America, doesn't it? Goes all the way down to the Gulf, I think. But obviously,
We'll
that's
get we'll,
America we're talking about, who are maybe not so reliable anymore.
we'll get to some more pipeline stuff in a bit here. The Quebec maple syrup producers fear major consequences. Like the maple syrup business, big business.
Yeah, half a billion, I think, last year they sold into America, something along those lines, and more than 50%, I think it's about 55% something of all their exports or all their production anyway goes down there to the Americans. But this is just one. This is obviously a particularly like iconic industry, isn't it? And it's like quintessentially Canadian, so it kind of has an emotional association that makes it worse. But obviously, this applies to absolutely everything. It applies to almost everything that Canada produces. It's going to apply to that too. Every industry is going to be shafted by this 25% tariff.
On a personal thing, I used to not like maple syrup, and I preferred just the Aunt Jemima brand or whatever.
I think your mic is gone again, mate. I'm sorry to say.
How about now?
Yep, I can hear you. You were saying something about Aunt Jemima. That's the last I heard.
It's a good thing we have 4 of these microphones that weren't being charged. Technical difficulties abound. Like after I stopped eating a lot of sugar, maple syrup tastes so much better than just liquid sugar. So yeah, maple syrup is one of Canadians' big brands, and it is like more desirable for me and a lot of Canadians over like liquid sugar.
Yeah, I mean, imagine back in the day, it must have like before there were sugars injected into everything that we eat. It must have been a real like magical experience.
Yeah, and then Francois Philippe Champagne sent a nasty letter to Amazon because Amazon basically is leaving Canada. And they're saying this is not the way business is done in Canada. And they're saying, well, yeah, there you go. We're not doing business in Canada.
Yeah, exactly. It's like if the way to do business in Canada is your way, Mr. Champagne, then we're not going to do business in Canada. That's basically what they've said, isn't it? And it looks a little bit kind of pitiable. It looks a little bit pathetic, frankly, to say something like that. Like, who cares? Who cares if that's not the way business is done in Canada? Like, Amazon holds the cards here, so you just kind of look a little bit a little bit feeble, really.
Canadian politicians from federal to provincial, even municipal, that have been standing there suppressing our natural resources and then just promoting the tech sector and all this stuff, and they thought that they could replace resources with that. And then just have to be watching with their jaws dropping on the floor as all this money is invested in the United States. I mean, there's some orders that were signed yesterday too in crypto and in AI and all these things, and the investment that's going to the U.S. makes Canada very undesirable as a place to invest in these things that don't need an actual domicile like attached to the land. What's attached to the land in Canada is our natural resources.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be the future of the Trump presidency, but I mean, a lot of people are keep associating this just with Trump, but Biden was quite protectionist as well, lest we forget the Inflation Reduction Act and all that. Like, this is a trend in the United States, so we can't just bank on this being a Trump thing, because once he's gone, which will be sooner than most people think, like he's all the rage right now, but he'll be gone pretty soon. But the Americans are going to continue to do this, and that means that we can't make ourselves a bad option. We have to make ourselves a good option if we want to get investment.
I should caution you that they've said that Donald Trump may stay around forever, right? Because it was the end of democracy if he got elected. Did we lose this microphone too? No? Well, it's kind of a comedy show today because we've lost quite a few microphones and my phone goes off.
It's the maple syrup mafia because we told jokes about maple syrup, so we're being targeted.
Well, we get no funding from the government, and we're having a tough time with Bill C-18. But like if we could have just like a sliver of CBC's, like $2 billion, that would be helpful, and then we could get some microphones that work.
Yeah, but no, I would say the lesson to be learned, and it's not just Canada. The Europeans are also learning this lesson, and they've been learning it for quite a number of years now. The lesson is if you don't even try to compete and you just regulate, you just make it harder, you know, create new taxes and so on, companies aren't going to hang around. Even if you think that their politics aligns with yours, they're not going to hang around. They're going to go to America if they get a better deal. That's how the market works. That's how the free market works. You go where you get the best deal.
Yeah. And then we have this survey here. We're almost moving around. We have this survey here from RBC showing that 55% of Canadians feel financially paralyzed and 48% can't maintain their current standard of living. And this is, again, you know, Justin Trudeau's famous comments, right? I don't worry about the economy. I mean, it clearly shows. This is why we find ourselves here in the Liberal Party itself. Again, our natural wealth is located in our land. And you had a good thing that you said the other day was like, we shouldn't think of oil and gas and LNG as dirty. We should think of it as our wealth, the wealth that builds hospitals, the wealth that builds roads, the wealth that, you know, builds our schools and everything, and the wealth that can reduce the taxes, financial tax burden on the individuals.
Totally. I mean, the worst thing for me is, you know, I mean, it's probably
What happened now?
insane because they make a lot of their money from natural resources too. But like a Canadian or an American, they might go somewhere like Norway, for example, and they'd be like, "Wow, look at this magical, beautiful country. Like, I wish my home country was like this." But Norway makes basically all of its money from fossil fuels. That's why they're rich. Well, it's a combination of fossil fuels and being smart about having fossil fuels. So it's kind of there's this disconnect, isn't there, between a beautiful society like Norway, one of the richest countries in the history of the world, an enormous GDP per capita, loads richer than Canada. They look at that and they're envious and they love it, and then they come back to Canada and they maintain their hostility to natural resources. It's kind of there's this cognitive dissonance that the hope has to be that with Trump's sort of brutality and viciousness and some would call it sort of realpolitik, but whatever it is, his attacks on Canada, you have to hope that people are going to see that and say, okay, well, if we want to be rich and also if we want to kind of like resist Trump, then we have to open up the pipelines. Literally, we have to use our natural resources as a springboard to wealth.
Yeah, and then we put this chart up, I think it was yesterday, all the canceled projects, and then Pierre Poilievre's got a hold of it, and Daniel Smith is now reposting it as well. According to Pierre Poilievre, $176 billion in value, right? The value of the proposed resource projects on this map that have died under the radical anti-development agenda. I mean, harsher words, harsher than we would have used, but under the radical anti-development agenda of the Liberal government, Freeland, Guilbeault, and Carney. I mean,
they would object to that.
Yeah.
The Liberals will be obviously furious about that and object to that and point to the TMX and the expansion of the Trans Mountain Pipeline, which, again, if you go back to that CBC article, we've said this a number of times. Sometimes CBC really do put out good articles, and that's one of them. So I would advise people read that. But if you have a look at that, they speak to an analyst, like an expert on the oil industry, and he basically says, without that TMX, Canada now would be like absolute panic stations. And Alberta too, it would be like desperate, horrible abyss that we would be staring into. But and obviously the Liberals like to talk about that and how proud they are of that. But I mean, so that would be their retaliation. That would be their retort to Pierre Poilievre there. But then the follow-on has to be, why didn't you build more? Why didn't you get the East pipeline through, which is like so precious and valuable? And that's where they're going to be judged, I'm afraid, and it's going to be negative judgment.
Yeah. And then Brian Lilly has put this out. He said this isn't about tariffs. Trump is setting out to restructure the American economy, by extension, the global trading order. And we can't stick to the same old plan and electing, you know, he's obviously saying electing Mr. Net Zero won't make Canada competitive. We definitely need somebody that thinks about our economy and not and the wealth that's beneath our feet. And that's the key thing, the wealth beneath our feet. And I don't think anybody in that Liberal Party that's, especially in the top row there, is thinking about the wealth beneath our feet. I don't know about the four others that were in that bottom row there, but I think if they really want change in the Liberal Party, a voice that comes to mind for me is Joel Lightbound or something like that, somebody that is more in the center. I don't think Mark Carney's in the center.
Yeah, I think he's a bit of a young gun, isn't he, that fella? And I don't think he's built up the kind of reputation within the party to be the leader. But yeah, I mean, it's it's hard for them to point to their history, their resume, and say, look how sensible I am about Canada's natural resources, which is why Chrystia Freeland now is desperately trying to say that she's the one that got the
Yeah, she's taking all the
Trans
credit for
Mountain
it. Yeah,
Pipeline
she did it.
expansion
She did it.
sorted.
Yeah.
Yeah, whereas obviously Trudeau, he took quite a lot of flack for that. If we cast our minds back, he took a
Yeah,
lot of
did.
abuse for that, not just from environmentalists, but also from a lot of sort of like fiscal conservative types who are saying like, why have you bought this? Why have you used our money to buy this at like such a high cost? So he actually took it from both directions. I mean, I feel like Trudeau would want to overrule Freeland there and say, actually, that was me, not you. So, but anyway, I mean, the thing the thing is, and this is why we've had this conversation a number of times where it's almost like the Liberal Party, Justin Trudeau, Chrystia Freeland, and I would include Mark Carney in that. It's like as every hour passes, they look more and more like an antique. They're so out of date. And Trump and the election of Trump just sort of emphasizes that. Trump is a man who is firmly in the year 2025. He is absolutely right here in the moment. Whereas people like Trudeau and Carney and Freeland, it's almost like they think it's still like 2009 or something, or 2010. It's like they're acting like we're still in this rules-based order, and we're still in the period where like you have to sacrifice the standard of living of your own people to achieve um, pretty sort of nebulous aims like net zero and climate change and carbon emission reductions. We're not in that era anymore. We're really not. And Trump is like the battering ram that's crashing into Canada every minute, saying we're not there. We're in a new age. We're in a new time now. And yeah, every time I hear them speak, I can't help but think that they're like in a parallel universe or something. That they're in the past. They haven't adjusted to the present.
I think that they listen to each other too much and not to the voices of Canadians that are hurting. I think that's a bigger reflection of what's going on, and I think that they'll hear more from Canadians as soon as we have an election. Doug Ford calling for
Yeah.
that election. Doug Ford says he's going to take advantage of the situation and he's going to call a snap election.
Yeah, well, he would have had to. There would have had to be an election next year
Yeah.
by law.
Mm-hmm.
But he's just taken something that is maybe not mentioned outside of Ontario very much is that the Ontario opposition parties, the NDP and the Liberals, there's also the Greens, but they're like, they don't really count. But the two main opposition parties, Ontario Liberals, Ontario NDP, are like kind of in disarray. They've had leadership changes. I mean, they're not doing well, and the polls are very much in Doug Ford's favor. So I think he's seeing this, and he did the same during COVID. Actually, he's kind of seeing the opportunity, and he's just saying, "Go on then, let's have an election." And
Yeah, I
and
think
obviously John Horgan did that in BC, didn't he? 2021.
he's also relying on that the Liberal brand is not looking very good. He better jump on it while it still doesn't look good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Holly Doan with a tweet out there too in the story saying that Karina Gold now opposes the increase in capital gains tax, and she voted for that measure 7 months ago. So that's caused a lot of grief for a lot of Canadians that have went out and did a bunch of tax stuff to get ahead of this capital gains tax, and now it's likely not going to live once we get government back in.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like what are they gonna commit to keeping from their time in government, I wonder. It's almost like everything's being thrown away. Certainly everything in the last sort of like few years, the big ones like um, any defense of the carbon tax just seems to have basically gone now. Um, the GST as applied to everything, the GST break as applied to everything that Trudeau applied it to, that's sort of gone. Though Karina Gould wants to keep it on like babies, on diapers and things like that, and products associated with children. But it just seems like they're trying to just erase the last couple of years of policy making, and that's we've said it a lot of times, but that's not a good look when you're trying to get your party elected.
Yeah, and then I didn't really want to do this, but I mean, it's worth doing. Elon Musk saying it's like he's been attacked relentlessly by legacy media trying to cancel him for saying "my heart goes out to you" and moving his hand his heart, and then they've played that same thing when Emmanuel Macron did the same thing and said the same thing, and yet we're still seeing, even Canadian media, we're still seeing them run this and being very disingenuous in how they portray Elon versus Emmanuel Macron.
You just have to wonder, and I seem like I feel like I ask this question every day. Like, who's this for? Like these hit jobs on Elon Musk. Who's it for? Who's the actual target audience? Because anybody that's anybody that knows anything about Elon Musk knows he's not a Nazi, for God's sake. Is anybody seriously suggesting that?
I
And
mean,
then anybody that's seen the video knows that he says the words "my heart goes out to you" and quite clearly puts his hand on his heart. Go watch the History Channel. Hitler doesn't put his hand on his heart and say, my heart goes out to you. That's not a Nazi salute, for God's sake. It's just like
they
so,
played it.
it's such a low grade discourse, isn't it?
I
I almost
watched
feel like dirty talking about it.
I watched CNN do it live with two commentators, and they just worked it over and over, and then every other outlet picked it up. And then it's a shame to see Canadian media outlets doing the same thing. And even today, a Canadian media outlet did it. For what reason, I don't know. Like, it doesn't make any sense. Even after Benjamin Netanyahu and a bunch of other Jewish organizations come out in defense of Elon Musk, yet they still run it and try to that base, I guess, that they have that want to heap hate on him or what. He's obviously a public enemy of that left-leaning media. So they've self-identified, in my mind, of who they are and what journalism maybe doesn't mean to them.
Yeah, but Elon Musk, let's be fair now. Elon Musk is a very, very consequential political partisan operative. He's a Republican Party operative. He's very much on the right, and he's a
Mm-hmm.
right-wing activist.
Now
And
he
he's the
is, yeah.
richest man in the world, in many ways, one of the most influential people in the world. We should acknowledge that. And once you acknowledge that, that explains why he's being targeted, because he's a partisan, and a lot of people want to bring him down for their own partisan reasons. But for our media, particularly Global News, who you didn't mention them, but I'll mention them. Global News that did that story. The question there is, why are you behaving in a partisan way? We know why Elon Musk is doing so. He's articulated that on a number of occasions. But why is Global News behaving as a partisan, as basically like a left-wing partisan organization? Why are you doing that? And if you are, and you are doing that, but why are you doing that? And then why are you not telling us why? Will you tell us why you want to operate as a sort of liberal partisan organization? I think that, for me, that's the point, really. I mean, Elon Musk, he's he's a legitimate target. He's also kind of part, in a weird sort of way, a part of the United States government and the government of Donald Trump. Okay, he's a legitimate target. He should be scrutinized. But it doesn't explain why he should be targeted along sort of partisan lines. And yeah, that's my question for Global News and the rest of them.
Yeah, like we've talked before, like we're taking a period in history of one of the most, to a lot of people, one of the most despicable regimes to ever rule on this planet. And I think on my LinkedIn post I put the freeing of one of the concentration camps. So there's actually a documentary where the soldiers were documenting as they arrived in those camps. People should watch that before they so freely want to push this same hatred and violence that was and atrocities that were put on people onto somebody else that did something, but it goes out to my from the bottom of my heart or whatever it is. It is actually it saddens me that that's what we do.
Yeah, I mean, it is a little bit depressing, isn't it? And that's why I kind of asked the question of who's it for. And I think really it's just for partisans at this point, because I mean, maybe back in the day when you relied on, before the internet or something like that, maybe this could have been made to fly and it could have been actually used as an effective smear against someone. But now people can just go and watch the video. Like people can just like listen to Elon Musk speak. You can listen to him speak for like 3 hours at a time on like Joe Rogan or something like that. And then you can make the decision yourself. Does this man sound like a Nazi? Obviously not. No. If you're part of the rational world, he is so obviously not a Nazi. So I just feel like that ship's kind of sailed really. And again, talking about how the liberals are kind of like living in history. I feel like a lot of these media organizations are also living in history, where a history where they could actually do this kind of thing and pull it off, but it doesn't work anymore.
Okay, let's leave that topic and let's move on to the markets. Gold looks like it's taking that run at that $2,800 mark we've been talking about for a while. Looks like it's slowly chugging its way up there, up pretty good this morning. Up at the I was just going to check and see where it is actually at this moment here, and I'm pretty sure it's at that same number. Yeah, 27.75 US in Canadian dollars. That would be a crazy amount as our dollar keeps falling. 39.78 in Canadian dollars. There you go for an ounce of gold. I remember a long time ago when you could buy an ounce of gold in Canadian dollars for a couple $100. Those were the days.
Even further back, at the end of the 19th century, you could go to Yukon and trip over it.
Yep, you
Get
sure
yourself a
could.
nice little bag of gold.
And again, part of our natural resources in Canada. And here's a fun fact for you. Most countries, including the U.S., which has they arguably the largest reserves of gold in its central bank, Canada has, ready? 0. We have
Yeah,
zero
at least
reserves of gold.
there's quite a lot in the ground, at least, but yeah, none in the vaults.
Right, and then the Bank of England, I'm pretty sure, still has some gold, although they were selling their gold for a while, but they do
No,
still.
quite infamously, Gordon Brown, if anybody remembers him, the guy that followed from Tony Blair, he very notoriously sold it all at like a cut rate, and then I think it was like a year later, or it might even have been less than a year, the price shot up, and he was left looking like a bit of a buffoon.
Yeah. China has always been well, for the past 10 years or so been stockpiling gold, as many other countries have been doing that as well. And then
Russia as well, yeah.
let's talk about our sickly Canadian dollar, which is the stock chart of Canada. Again, those famous words that I don't worry about the economy, and there you go. That clearly shows. And this is the chart that the rest of the world looks at us and values our dollar. This is it right here. So.
Yeah, I mean, particularly when we import so much from the United States, it wouldn't matter so much if we were like a big beastly export nation like the Chinese or something like that. The Chinese intentionally devalue their currency because it's in their interests. It helps them maintain their competitiveness. But that's not what we are. We're like more of a consumption economy, and we also rely on the US. So it's bleak. It's very bleak when you look at that.
I mean, there's been arguments made that Canada has artificially depressed its dollar too over the past years. As we are an export nation, we've tried to hold it down. But this is like holding it down is one thing, letting it collapse is another.
Yeah, but also when nothing like the Chinese, I mean, it makes sense for them to do that because they also they produce most of the things that they consume as well. We're not like that. We consume vast amounts of stuff from the United States. So for us to bring down our dollar is like, it has massive effects on inflation.
Well, it has massive effects on the consumer, that's for sure. In the AI world, this is arguably one of the biggest pieces of news out there. This is just happened at OpenAI. Sam Altman and them announced this. This is the operator. The first launch of this is only available in the United States right now. It just launched, and it's only available for a $200 a month subscription. But this is coming soon to a iPhone or whatever, a device, Android device near you. So this is key. this is an operator where it can actually, you can tell it and it will do actions. It will search the internet, it'll book appointments and all kinds of things. I'm going to play a small clip because this is, I advise you to go out and watch it. It's about 23 minutes or so long, or a bit longer. Go ahead and play that small clip there.
Simple. I'm going to use OpenTable and say, book me a table for 2 at Beretta tonight at 7 p.m. Okay.
And so you specifically chose OpenTable here.
Yeah, in this case, I'm asking operator to use OpenTable to book a table for 2 at Beretta. Beretta is a restaurant in San Francisco. It's great. You should try it out. And at 7 p.m. And I'm using OpenTable in this case, but I could have easily said, just do Beretta, and it would have probably gone to search engine, figured out how to make a reservation as well. But let's see what it does.
So can you explain what's happening in this?
Yeah, right. So I'm going to expand this a little bit. So as soon as I typed in the query, operator instantiated a completely remote browser. This browser is running in the cloud somewhere. And as you can see, it's already up and running. And my hands are off the keyboard. I'm not typing these things.
So this is just the AI is clicking around.
AI is just clicking around. It started this browser session. It knew where OpenTable website is, which is opentable.com. As you can see, it's summarized chain of thought here as well, which is it's gone to the URL, searched for Beretta, and something cool really happened, which is for some reason, OpenTable thought we were in Virginia, and it auto-corrected itself to San Francisco. This is using, so like ChatGPT, in Operator, you can also give custom instructions. So I'm going to show this really quickly here. Okay. So I've given a custom instruction that for queries that need it.
So I think you want to know where you were today when that happened. Like that is the first really text to action stuff where the AI agent is actually going out and doing things. And you just have to use your imagination a little bit of what it can do. And it says it can go out and build websites. It can go out and do a whole bunch of things now. But just think of your booking schedule for haircuts, all kinds of things. And then when you add the voice component, it'll actually make phone calls and all that kind of stuff. This is what the United States of America is working on. Well, Canada is sending out harmful tweets on Heinz ketchup.
Yeah, not just tweets. He's also speaking about it, isn't he, at news conferences? But yeah, it is very, very cool. And I tell you, like it's a bit weird because all of these chaps here, I would imagine, I don't know, but I'm gonna guess that they probably all have like computer science degrees. They all probably started out as software engineers to some extent, or I mean, at least that's generally true of such people. But I think that they're almost going to be like one of the first ones to go because I'm not sure if people are aware just how much money software engineers get in the US. They get like 6 figures straight out of university. They get like 200,000 US dollars a year. They're very, very expensive employees. And what we've just seen in that video suggests that maybe that job is not long for this world, really. If you could just tell an AI to go and, write some code, then it's gonna, because a lot of people keep assuming that's like, oh, that's gonna mean personal assistants are out of a job. But I think it also means a lot of quite big jobs are gonna go as well.
Yeah, it wasn't too long ago that Bill Gates was out there and says that you need to put your kids in computer science. They need to learn programming. That is the future of the world. They need to learn programming. Jensen Huang just said, this was at CES, he said, programming is not something you need to learn because programming is natural language. You just need to know how to speak, to imagine what you want. And then the programming will be all done with natural language. And that is the key. That is the big key in all this, right? Because it was really the domain of people that knew how to put commands into a computer, right? Which is, computer science degree. You needed that, right? To how to put the commands in, how to make it do different things. The key here is it's natural language now. So you don't need, basically, it's like a foreign language, right? To most people, you need to learn a language. You don't need to learn the language now. You need to speak the language you know.
Yeah, and it's incredibly cumbersome, and it's very, very, very boring to learn JavaScript and HTML and all the rest of it. It's really mind-numbingly dull, and like writing in square brackets and asterisks and things like that.
It's a language.
It kind of like it's like the world's worst language in many ways, most boring language ever invented. But it's kind of like to imagine the ability to just write in English or even just speak and just describe what you want and have a computer put that into action. Yeah, I mean, that's a remarkable advance, isn't it? That's immense
So,
progress.
so what you brought up there earlier too, the jobs under threat. The jobs under threat are the ones that you're sitting in front of your keyboard, just like this. Those are the jobs that are under threat. The ones where the computer is doing most of the work and you're giving it commands. Well, if you have to take away me giving commands, then obviously I don't need to sit in front of it, do I?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, and to be honest, that to me at least feels like a liberation for the species because I don't think those jobs really make many people very happy. Just sitting there at a computer and typing in like, close brackets, forward slash underscore. Like, no, nobody really wants to do that, do they? So
Well, for
there's
the money they do.
potentially a kind of freeing. There's a freeing of
Yeah.
the human spirit, dare we say, as long as it's
So
not used in a
I,
like selfish way.
I do believe we're entering an age of abundance and an age of creativity because it's going to be about your imagination. The technology is not really slowing us down anymore. It's all about our own imagination.
Yeah, but I mean, it does sound a little bit utopian, doesn't it, when we talk about it that way? I mean, in reality, there are probably going to be a lot of problems, and there's going to be a lot of abuse, and there are going to be a lot of unpleasant people are going to try and like use this to their own advantage and exclude other people from it. But I feel like eventually, we should get there. We should achieve
So
some kind of like a more leisurely society. That
I,
would be nice, wouldn't it?
I think the key point here is all of this is happening in the United States for the most part, right? I'm sure there's lots happening in China as well. It's not going to happen in Canada here. Again, how we can contribute and be a part of it is in our natural resources because that's what it needs. It needs energy, right? AI needs energy. And that's what we have, right? Like this United States has a brand new roller skate in AI and we've got a brand new key. Why don't we get together? I think there was a song that in the 50s, right? And I think
Yeah,
that's the message that we need to say is that you need us, right, to make this a reality, to get to Mars, to get to make a lunar base and all that stuff. You need us in our energy. Like let's be a partner, because that's how we can contribute, right? Because we're not going to attract Mark Zuckerberg here. We're not going to attract Sam Altman here. We can't even keep Amazon here for, do you know what I mean? Um,
yeah. So I would say, um, definitely resources are the key to Canadian prosperity. I mean, I'm not sure many people would dispute that if they were being honest with themselves. But I would also say we can, or we should in Canada also have ambition to do other things as well. And, you know, when you look at the history of Canadian innovation, like Canada really is punched above its weight, especially when you look at back in the day when barely anybody lived here. It was a very, very, very low population. But this is still the place that brought insulin out into the world to be used in a medical capacity. I mean, the Canadarm thing, like
yeah,
the Canada's capable of like really
it is.
serious innovation, and that shouldn't be a surprise to anyone when you just go out and speak to Canadians.
But
Many, many
the
extremely
danger
intelligent people live in this country.
the danger right now is that mobility wasn't that easy back then. Mobility is a lot easier now, and the concentration of activity is also so important. And Silicon Valley is a really good example of concentration of ideas in people, right? Most of the tech companies were birthed out of Silicon Valley, right?
Yeah, that's definitely true. But I mean, technology can also change with
Yep.
like, the advancement of remote working, things like that. There's potential that it change. But yeah, I mean, it's also definitely the case that you talk about how America's so far ahead with AI. Another one of the countries in the world that's pretty highly ranked in AI is my land of birth, Britain.
Hmm.
Well, England really. It's mostly around Cambridge and London, places like that. But that's one of the that's one of the cockpits of AI development. It's really quite advanced there. But can they actually keep it in the long run is another question entirely because energy in England is excessively expensive. It's extraordinarily expensive to just get electricity to power something. And obviously, AI requires a lot of power. Therefore, by default, the Americans just win. So British AI experts are just, the likelihood is pretty high that they're just going to go to America where they can actually make their ambitions
Well,
come to life because
maybe we
energy is
sh-
not prohibitively expensive.
Maybe we should be reaching out to the English and saying we got a key and you got a brand new roller skate.
Yeah, that's what
Anyway,
I was going to say. I was actually going to say that. Like, so the British have this brain power, but they don't have the materials to actually bring it to life. So in that scenario, we've got the materials here in Canada, and we also actually have a lot of the brain power in Canada, but let's just focus on the materials. Like we have very cheap energy and abundant energy comparatively, like, versus the rest of the world. So yeah, like that kind of tells you that maybe Canada can actually have quite a bright future in technology and in AI particularly because why shouldn't we go and headhunt these Europeans that like can't afford to turn their heaters on at night? Like come over to Canada, like energy's abundant. Do your thing in Kelowna, why not?
we need to free the beast, though. We need to free the energy beast. That's what we need to do. Mark Zuckerberg, kind of like now speaking out and saying this will be the defining year for AI in 2025. This is from his recent Facebook post. I think it was a couple hours ago. He expects Meta AI to be the leading assistant serving more than 1 billion people, and they call their AI Llama. Llama 4 will become the leading state-of-art model and will build an AI engineer that will start contributing increasing amounts of code to our R&D efforts to power this. Like they're definitely building big data centers again. Here, big data centers that require huge amounts of power. We've seen with Microsoft making a deal for nuclear energy, and I think Amazon did the same thing. Everybody needs power, right? And that's the one thing that we have to offer. A lot of these big companies, they have cash and they have a lot of engineers working at their company already. So they're looking to get into the game, as is Google with Gemini, and like I said, Facebook with Llama, OpenAI with Sam Altman, and then Elon Musk's Grok, which he says he's going to have in Teslas shortly. He'll be putting Grok into Teslas, and he has a big data center there in Texas, there, Colossus. So
I must say, I'd be surprised if this this was an accurate forecast from Zuckerberg because can you correct me here? I don't think they've had a success in a very, very long time. I can't think of anything. I
well, that
mean,
met
Threads was a ridiculous joke. Those glasses didn't really work.
the
That VR
metaverse,
world, he
yeah,
seemed to
metaverse.
spend like years on that virtual reality thing, which has just come to nothing.
Yeah, there might be more to the what's. I do have a set of those goggles because I like to stay up on things. I think the headsets are still cumbersome, but some of the stuff you see in there is mind blowing. But like a lot of people feel nausea and stuff like that too. So I think it's a ways away. But I was just at the CES. A lot of glasses are there. A lot of different people are bringing out the like the metaverse type stuff, even including into the what that market companion market, to say that nicely. There you go. A lot of stuff. So lots of interesting innovation. Lam is obviously behind out there. OpenAI and Elon Musk, sometimes states that Grok is right there at its heels. I mean, to me, I see OpenAI in the lead, especially with this operator thing. This is huge. I think this is that next step, right? The operator thing is like unleashing the agents, right? Because it's one
Yeah.
thing to talk to it, and another thing for it to actually text to action. And that's what the former Google CEO was saying. Text to action will be the mind-blowing piece of it for sure.
Another thing that I would sort of mention here, like, look how fast these companies do things. It kind of like when you look at it from a perspective of like a country, it kind of makes you a bit jealous, doesn't it? It's like they're getting all of these gigawatts online and it's like all this money and it's just like build and they do it so quickly. And
Yeah.
then you look at a country like Canada or a province like British Columbia and it's like, oh yeah, we'll build that dam in 40 years. Yeah, we'll sort that out for you. It's like why is it not possible for the state to do things as rapidly as these companies?
Well,
It's quite upsetting.
Judson Wang had something to really say about Elon Musk. They built that Colossus data center. That's all the hardware and everything. Built that data center, and they revamped a building. But I can't remember the exact timeline. But he did it in less than I can't remember, like 60 or 90 days. Like, they say, well, it would have taken some people like years to do it. And they did it so fast. And he said it was so complicated to do it. And the only person that could do it on this planet is Elon Musk, he said. Like, it's just unheard of. And the same thing when they launched their gigafactories in Shanghai, and then they just finished a solar plant there. They build them under budget and under time. Like, I think the solar plant factory was under a year and done. It's just the speed that they do things is we can't even come close to that, right? We can't
Yeah,
even
and
correct our ketchup facts here in
the ketchup fact checker department doesn't even function.
like
Never mind the
because
infrastructure.
of course, maybe they'll come out and say that was misinformation and disinformation by Heinz, right?
Yeah.
They,
Well, either way, if you're the leader of a serious country like Canada, going through a serious crisis as we are now, you don't really want the news to be about ketchup because of your own nonsense. That's not where you want to be, I don't think, as a leader. But another thing I was going to say there, sorry, about like doing things fast and big projects. We've got used to the private sector doing things loads better than the state, but it wasn't always that way. Like look to the middle of the last century, like during the war and around the
yeah,
war and the depression and stuff. Some enormous projects were completed by the state. Like, it's absolutely possible to do it.
yeah.
Like the American state and the British and Canadian states created an atomic bomb in pretty short order. They did it
Do
really
you know what the
quickly.
key? Do you know what the key there is, Ian? It's out
What's
of
that?
necessity and lack of regulation, because they would have said get it done, like not like have to do 10 studies and stuff. We tried to build a washroom here in Kelowna, and it takes forever, right?
Yeah, no, that's the answer. It's the the bureaucracy, the sort of it infects every aspect of life now, doesn't it? And I think when you've been nice and cozy and warm and prosperous for many years, as we have in the West, you get more and more regulations put in place because I guess people just want more comfort and they want things to be better and more perfect, and they want to resist unnecessary change.
So,
But if you do that for too long, you end up stagnant, and that's the
so
that's the position we're in now.
So here's the attraction of what Donald Trump has been saying to these tech companies, and the key word that you just talked about. He's going to deregulate, and he's going to charge them less tax, and he's going to fast track stuff. Sounds like a plan, right?
I think I think that's in accordance with what I said earlier, which is like Trump is a man of his time. He's a man of this time, and I think he recognizes that that's what you need to do.
Yeah. Here's another Elon Musk company, and I was in Vegas, and I've ridden the Vegas loop a couple times, but they just opened up a new part of that loop, and I think this is the one that goes out to the airport. So the Vegas loop is now just open. I was speaking with some of the drivers for the Vegas loop, and it's pretty cool to go under there. Like, it's fast, right? Because you're just going through the tunnel with a Tesla, and it avoids all the traffic, and it's hard to get around in Vegas, I tell you. You even drive a few blocks in that, like the strip, and it's just like hard to move. And underground, look at that. And I guess the Boring Company is, like starting to build more and more of these things, and moving people quite quickly through, because they're one-way loops, right? Like, so they loop, and they got this machine that, cuts a hole in the earth. And then you have Teslas that just like, if you're down there, it's like an army of ants of Teslas moving in and out all over the place, right? So there you go. You come into a station, just like almost like a subway, and they have ways they stop and different things, and then you get out of there, and then you can go to various places. And when you come down the pedway or the escalator, they just ask you where you're going, and then you go to the station and you get in the car, and then it takes you there in a couple minutes, and then you're out. Pretty impressive.
Very cool. Everybody hates traffic, so I think everyone's going to be a fan of that.
I think that's it for now. I didn't find a meme today, unless you found something. But I guess we could have done the meme, the ketchup thing. Don't spill the ketchup. Something like that, right?
Yeah.
Or don't cry over spilled ketchup. How does that go? Don't cry over spilled milk. Don't cry over spilled ketchup.
Yeah.
There's got to be some yelling in that room. Like, who gave me that information? Unless he found it himself. Like, putting that out there, just like so much. Like, You know, when they say you got egg on your face, you got ketchup on your face.
I think the way that he said it, and it seemed to be something that was prepared. It seemed that he was working off a bit of a script. So I think I do think it'll have been done by other people. Yeah.
Well, I think maybe they got to have some people there that have actually been in the business world a little bit, not just somebody that's 18 just had a birthday and is just idolizes Trudeau. Maybe he hires a whole bunch of young people that just idolize him. Like I saw him running through a school just recently, high fiving everybody like he was Taylor Swift. I was just like, what is going on here?
Well, he has always said, hasn't he, that like the reason he got into politics was to help young people, and he's all about the sort of the youth vote and that.
Well,
So yeah, maybe that's right.
Here's your chance for 14-year-olds to vote for the new Liberal leader.
Yeah,
because
you can't pick Trudeau.
that's that thing on a 14-year-old's mind, right?
Definitely.
Anyway, that's all we have for today. We thank you for watching. Sorry about the glitches that we went through today, and hopefully the sound and everything is okay. And I see that our background is quite washed out again, as we had a longer show. But I thought we had some good topics. So, as always, thank you, Ian Burns, and we'll be back Monday with a new and improved show that has better sound. There you go. And have a great weekend. And thank you for watching.
We don't just report the news. We live here too. We're your neighbors, bringing you stories that matter to all of us. No government.